It's the Brad and John Show.
Brad and John Show. This is the C Block, the Charlie Block. This is the date. Today is September 22nd, 2025. And what's most important about me mentioning that is we're going to talk about something we talked about in the previous B Block. If people are listening live, they'll go, okay, we just heard that. But if people are listening in the future on bjshow.co or bjshow.us, our two podcast channels, they may not know the reference of this. Okay. John, we were talking about Charlie Kirk and networking, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. On Friday, I have been invited. This is my second time I went to this group. On Friday, I went to a group called the TFG, the Friday group, which is a large networking group which meets at the Goodwood Brewery out there in O'Fallon. If you know where I'm talking about, it's just across the railroad tracks from the Fallon City Hall. It's right next to the Edward Jones office, which has been there a long time. If you know where the railroad tracks are, it's the old McGurk's, if some people know this place as McGurk's, okay? And my second time there, and it was interesting because they announced that there were, I think it was probably about a dozen high school kids there from CAPS in St. Charles County. I don't know exactly what CAPS stands for, but what CAPS is an organization that is trying to get kids into business when they're in high school. Kids at this point in time, it's probably the wrong word. They're young adults. They're 16, 17, 18.
It's Center for Advanced Professional Studies. I just Googled it.
Okay. And their thing is getting people into internships, okay? And getting these people, these high school students involved in businesses, working part-time as interns and things like that. I think they can actually make money doing this as well, too. I don't think it has to be like a volunteer kind of thing. Not to pound my chest and everything like that. But if you know how these networking groups work, typically, have the leader of the group give an intro, give a little blah, 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 blah. Then everybody goes around and does their elevator pitch, and everybody gets 30 seconds. And, somebody says, I'm Joe Smith. I run a exterminating company, and my bugs are dead bugs because you should hire me because I'm going to kill all the bugs in your house. Okay, it comes to my turn, and I just say, I introduce myself. I'm Brad Hildebrand, and I tell them I'm the owner of Westplex 1071, Westplex Talk, and I said, this is my thing, which I thought was appropriate. I said, I firmly believe in internships. 53 years ago, I was an unpaid intern at KSLQ. Today, I own the place. And it was interesting because I actually got a little round of applause for that. So then everybody goes around the room, and then they have what they call their networking meeting, their networking session, where they essentially let you just go and shake hands and talk to people. And this is what was interesting for me. And I'm not saying this like to be Brad Bighead, but I found this fascinating. I'm sitting there, and where I was, I actually had like a high top at the bar because, we're in a big room that's like a restaurant normally. And a young woman comes right up to me. I mean, just literally across the room, I could see her coming. And she says, "Are you the radio guy?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "You're the guy with Westplex 107. And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "That's my favorite radio station." So it turns out she's one of the CAPS people. She actually looked a little bit older than high school. Looked a little bit more mature. I was saying that I was thinking she was like probably early to mid-20s, but she was probably 17 or 18 years old. And she told me that she listens to my station all the time. And I said to her, "Yeah, right." I started kidding with her. And she goes, and she does the liner. She says, she does the one about hey, we've got a Geofenced signal. And if you
it's the made-up Geofenced thing. That's hilarious.
And if you leave the Westplex, and she does that. And I go, "Oh, you do listen." She says, "I love your station." And I started talking to her. I go, "So you're in CAPS?" She goes, "Yes." And she says, "I'm looking for," I go, "What do you want to do?" She says, "I want to go into marketing." I go, "Really?" And she says, "I'm looking for a place I can do part-time marketing. I can come in and learn marketing at a real business." Now, strangely enough, across the room is one of my clients, Jeremy Wolf, the guy that owns one of my advertisers. He owns the taco, the HVAC company.
Yeah, you do a great jingle for them, Brad.
Right.
So they're an HVAC company, right?
HVAC company. And I said to her, the guy you need to talk to is Jeremy Wolf. And I pointed him across the room. And with this big room, I go, "That's him right there." So she says, "Do you mind if I go talk to him?" I go, I say go for it. So literally, she makes a beeline around the bar, across the room, and I see her, and I'm talking to a couple other people, and then later I follow up, and she's there talking to Jeremy. And I went up to Jeremy, and I go, Jeremy, hire this woman because she is what you need. Because the point being is, as a high school student, and especially as a woman high school student, I think it took incredible self-confidence, and let's call it guts, for her to get up and walk over to me and talk to me. And then when I pointed out Jeremy Wolf across the room, for her to go right over to him, because he's the owner of Stay Cool Climate Control, and to talk to him. And when I said to Jeremy, I said to him, I think you should seriously consider her. I don't know what's going to happen with that the whole bit. I text, and what was interesting was she wanted to take pictures with me, and she was with another young lady who, quite honestly, didn't say much, but I shook both their hands, and she says, "Can I get a picture with you?" So her girlfriend, her wherever it was, her friend from school, took a picture of me, and then I said to her, "I'd love to have that picture. Would you text it to me? My numbers." I gave her my card. I said, "My number's on my card." So she texted to me. So then I texted her back and said, "Look, I'd love to have you on my show. I do the show in the morning. I'd love to talk about what you just experienced with CAPS and the whole bit, how interesting it might have been for you to go see all these people at a networking event and the whole bit." And we went back and forth, and essentially I think we left it where she had to get approval. I don't know exactly where it's at. I'm going to follow up today to see if I can maybe get her on today. But I'm not going to even say her name because I don't want to put her in a situation where I don't embarrass her or anything like that. I'm saying this is so important, and I've said this before. The day I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I had a job, full-time job at the radio station, at the original KSLQ, because I interned there for 2.5 years. I started out as an unpaid intern, then got paid and was working part-time. And my final quarter, back in the old days of SIU, we were in the quarter system, not the semester system. I did a full-time internship, unpaid, working at KSLQ for 4 months. And on the Friday before my graduation, the boss calls me in the office and offers me a full-time job. I can't tell you how important I thought it was that this CAPS program existed. And the other point is, I'm not trying to make myself out to be a great guy, because if you know me, I'm less than a great guy. Matter of fact, a lot of people would tell me I'm a terrible guy.
Come on, get to it.
And I agree with them. I made a point of finding every one of those interns at that meeting that day, or the CAPS kids, and shake their hand. And most of them were young guys. And quite honestly, they were all kind of wimpy. And I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but this woman so impressed me because, A, she sought me out. She had an interest in talking to me about the radio business. B, when I told her, "See that guy over there? Go talk to that guy." She went right over there. She exhibited the behavior of someone who could have been in their 30s or 40s. Get what I'm saying, John?
I get exactly what you're saying. And I mean, this type of group would select for people who were a little bit more ambitious, who have a little bit more self-confidence. And even though, did you say the guys you saw were wimpy?
Well, they just...
just timid. I don't want you to interrupt at this moment.
Yeah,
Brad,
you're right.
But I'm just saying,
timid.
This kind of group would select for people who would tend to have a little bit more confidence. So good for that woman.
Timid would be a little bit more, because they just... A lot of them just stood around in a group. When we were doing this opening networking thing, instead of like going and talking to people, they all stood. There was like 6 guys, and I literally went over and shook each of the guys' hands. And I told them, I said, "Look, this is really important for you to learn. This is what it's all about. This is networking. And it doesn't matter, what college degree you have. What it comes down to is who you know and who you can call on when you need advice, when you need someone that you can call on to possibly do some business with, or they can do some business with you." And then when I moved around the room a little bit more, another guy I know, a young guy who was 22, 23, who I had a meeting with last week. Matter of fact, him and I went to a bar together. Believe it or not, we didn't drink alcoholic beverages. He doesn't drink, I don't drink. But he invited me, and he's 22 years old, and he's working for a real estate company, and they're like flipping houses. And I had a really good meeting with him. So when I went around the room a little bit farther, he was there with one of his company. He works for this company. And they were talking to 3 other of these interns, the CAPS people. And when they started done talking, I started interrupting. I said, "Look, see what you're doing right now? This is real important. This is networking. You've met this guy. at some point in time, one of you guys may get an interest in real estate. If you've taken this guy's card, here's a guy you can call up. Here's a guy you can call up and say, hey, you know what? I met you at the so-and-so networking group a year or 2 or 3 years ago, and, you were talking about real estate. You know what? That's where my career's headed. Anyway, I could grab a cup of coffee with you. I think this is so important. And the interesting part of this is that the reason I mention it because high school kids, because I called in the last segment. I called out the fact that this Did you want to name who the guy is? I'm talking about the guy who says he's known Charlie.
Yeah, why don't you say his name, Brad?
I don't. You mentioned it. You mentioned the guy's
name. No, and here's why. Because we're not going to go through the thing where you hear something and there's manufactured drama here. But Brad, the Charlie Kirk in 2010, I took the 15 seconds it took to look it up, volunteered across the river from Marc Cox. The gentleman we're discussing in 2010 was working on national U.S. Senate campaigns, including Roy Blunt and the Marc Cox guy across the river. So that's where he got to know Charlie Kirk.
Okay. The point I'm making to this is if you have kids, and especially, it's going to be interesting. 10 years from now, I'd be interested to see what's going on with John Combest kids. And I think that
You think you'll be around in 10 years, Brad?
I probably won't. The way things going with my results that came back on Friday, I don't know if I'll be around 10 more months, but that's a whole other story. Okay, but the results, the point I'm trying to make is that I wish like hell I had some kind of an organization when I was in high school. And I think the things that I point up Charlie Kirk as being a tremendous, asset and someone to look up to is don't ever say to your kids when they're 14 or 15 or 16, don't worry about that. That's something is called adulting. When you get out of college, you'll have to worry about that. I think it's so important that the young kids, when I'm talking the high school kids, that today's high school kids be exposed to business, be exposed to people who are, working, as professionals, working as firemen, working as carpenters, and seeing what the business is about, and finding out what it's like to, wake up every morning, especially if you're blue collar, wake up every morning at 5 o'clock and pack a lunchbox and go to a job site, or to be white collar and wake up every morning like John does at 9 o'clock and then maybe stroll into the office and things like that. I think this is tremendously important.
That was funny.
And I mean this sincerely. It's to the point where this is what's frustrating to me when I hear this crap about the school board crap where all they're caring about is stupid library books. And, I go back to the point where we talked about, matter of fact, one of the best of shows was playing this morning. We were talking about the Marc Cox thing, about the fact that he had his Marc Cox candidate list and all of his school board people. I'm so tired of this BS about what's in the library. You know what my opinion of this is? And my mom's
What's that, Brad? What do you think about libraries, Brad? And can you work in a pendulum reference for the second time today?
My mom she's listening, and I know she's never did because when she was live, she never listened to the radio. I know she's not listening to me up in heaven. I say shut all the libraries down because I say libraries are antiquated. You don't need libraries anymore. You got stupid internet. I can find anything I want on my phone. If I want to read any book, I may have to pay for it, something like that. But most of the time, anything I want is right on my phone.
I think a lot of people that agree with that, Brad, would also say radio is stupid. You have every song you could possibly want on Spotify.
But
you know what the library needs? Library needs a Nielsen system where they can make up surveys and then have people say, according to our research, 107% of Americans visit a library twice a day.
But John, what Spotify does not have right now is you and me.
The Brad and John show.
Doesn't have us. We're not on Spotify.
Yeah, because there's a box that you could have ticked on Red Circle to send it to Spotify, but of course you didn't.
But the point I'm making, John, is that, and you sort of dovetail into something nice is this is what I don't like about the consolidation of the media business, is when you get all the iHearts and to the point where you can drive cross country and you can hear.
Can you hear the same show, Brad? If you're driving, sometimes I used to drive from St. Louis, I'd drive out west, and as I'm driving through mid-Missouri, I hear the exact same thing.
It's making fun of me again. Okay.
I'm not doing a jam fob, Brad. I'm just saying that, you know what? You could listen to, and in fact, what I heard was the good folks who purchased KDHX. If you listen to, their stations from here to Colorado, you could hear the exact same content on the national syndication.
I will just.
It's McRadio, Brad.
I will end the story by saying I listened too much to NPR this weekend. And I heard a very interesting story about a lady who is a librarian from Louisiana who, it's a long story, but essentially she became the victim of doxing. She became the victim of people doing terrible things to her. And ultimately she fought back and she sued two of the guys. And she said right up front that sued two of the guys for defamation. The case is still going on and things like that. And she said that she was doing what she thought was proper as a librarian. And I think most of the librarians get it, that especially if you're in a grade school or a junior high environment, there are age-appropriate books. And for some crazy donkey reason, there are some librarians that are trying to push that narrative to the point where you have the books. And matter of fact, I always find this funny are interesting when you see the parents show up at the school board meetings and read from these books. And the school board say, yo, you can't read that. Well, this is in the library. If my kid can check it out, how come I can't read it at the school board meeting? Which I find fascinating because it's an excellent point. If what you're reading at the school board meeting out of one of the library books is inappropriate, why is it appropriate to be in the library? And I'm not saying these books are everywhere, but the Jane Puszkars of the world, I think, have gone too far. If Jane Puszkar would tell me that she's a big proponent of caps and things like that, if Jane Puszkar would telling me that she thinks that they should bring back auto repair and electricity classes and shop and woodworking back to in the Francis House, which for the most part is mostly gone. How do I know? Because my kids went there, and to the point where in most high schools they got rid of the trade because what were colleges? I mean, what were high schools essentially geared to be? College prep, correct,
They
John?
sure were. And at 8:02, Brad, there's a young woman somewhere who's writing a brand new taco jingle. It's 8:02. See you tomorrow, Brad.
That's Jam Fob John. Jam Fob John. Okay. John, have a good day.
You too, Brad. See you tomorrow.